You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, where we got a special treat for you. We have not one, but two Obans on the show today.
That's too many.
Word for it. Treat is a word.
Erin Oban, former state senator, former head of the North Dakota Rural Development Director for the state of North Dakota. Wow, my mind blanked there for a minute.
USD is what you're looking for.
United States Department of Agriculture. And then and now is an advocate for a new organization called North Dakotas for Public Schools, which is interesting. You know, we had a big debate in the last legislative session about education on multiple fronts. Obviously, we had the school choice or vouchers, whatever you want to call it, debate. We also had, school lunches was another hot debate. And we're always making a lot of policy around charter schools is something that got done, that got over the line. That's something that's going to be implemented in the coming years here. But part of that debate, is a lot of people talking about our public schools. And I think sometimes maybe people, because a lot of the population, we think, we're familiar with public schools, and most of us, just about everybody went to public schools or even private schools. That matters too. A lot of the voters, I would say at any given time, maybe the majority of the electorate, don't really have an active touch with their public schools in any given moment because they're not in school. And they don't necessarily have children in school. Maybe their children are grown up. Maybe they didn't have children, whatever the case may be. And what my understanding of what this organization is going to do is maybe help link that knowledge gap through some advocacy and help people understand a little bit what's going on, what the challenges are, what the successes are in our public schools right now. Did I summarize that correctly, Erin? North Dakotans for Public Schools, that's what the goal is?
Yeah, I think you did summarize it pretty well, Rob. It actually, it's, I don't even know if I'd call it as an organization as much as a coalition of people. And it started during the legislative session, in part because of that recognition that there was a gap of ways to inform and engage people who don't belong to like an organization, who don't belong to an association. And to your point, who maybe either are past that point where they have a direct connection to public education or to their public schools in their community, who care about them, like who recognize how important public schools and public education is to the economy in their community, maybe especially in rural communities. As somebody who grew up in a really small town, schools are essentially the cornerstone of like everything that happens in small communities, but also in communities the size of Minot and Bismarck and Fargo. So we recognize that gap, and I had some time to fill, and a real strong interest in engaging in those conversations. Obviously, during the time that I spent in the legislature, I sat on the other side of those tables on the education committee the entire time. I've served as a classroom teacher. With rural development, I got to really get to know a lot of rural communities and see the pivotal role that public schools play. Oftentimes, they're the biggest employers. I mean, like, this is about, I think, so much bigger than the way we sometimes pigeonhole these conversations. And I wanted to engage, and we found a way to do it, and I think do it successfully. So now we want to continue to build on that momentum that was started.
Erin, I want to pigeonhole the conversation a little bit here. I mean, you were in the Senate. You obviously sat on the education committees. During the end of your time in the Senate, which I think 2018, we started to see, when were you done?
2022, I left. I ran re-election in 2018. And
just like I thought. I didn't do any research before this interview.
Get your wife, buddy.
Yeah. It's all a blur.
Relationship too.
It's all a blur. towards the end of your time in the legislature, we started to see more of this sort of, I don't want to say attacks, but misinformation about public schools. I mean, we all remember conversations about furries and cat litter and what books are in the schools and indoctrination and all that kind of stuff. And I think last
Critical
session,
race theory. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, a lot of the national narrative crap definitely was filtering into the conversations inside the halls of the legislature about public schools. Yeah.
But I think last session it sort of was even more accelerated. We had some legislators. Keith Kempenick said the reason why we need money to go to private schools is because public schools are just indoctrinating kids. Like, so it's one thing. I think the vast majority of public supports public schools, but what will North Dakotans for Public Schools do to educate legislators what's actually happening in schools, not just what they saw on Facebook? Because I think that's so important.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, like, I would like to put to use that experience I had as a legislator. I understand to quite a bit of the extent to which they as legislators receive their information. And we feel pretty strongly that the source of their information should come as locally as possible. So no matter what news organizations they're taking in, what podcasts they're listening to, we would really love it if when they hear something, true, false, or otherwise, they would like go to their own public schools in their communities and find out what is true and what is not. They would learn more. And so one of the things that we intend to help do as a coalition is facilitate more of that connection between our decision makers, so in this case, legislators, and the work that's happening. I received dozens of invitations as a legislator from, local businesses, from chambers of commerce, from hospitals, organizations that provide services, from veterans groups. I mean, you name it, we got invitations to go, from the energy sector and law enforcement, like literally from everybody. And sometimes I feel like we minimize the importance of extending that invitation from schools to open their doors to people like legislators, to invite them in and to sit down with them and talk about what's going well, what are challenges, how might you be a better partner, how might we be a better partner with the work that you're doing during the not just during the legislative session, but also, during that interim when there's a little bit more time to be thoughtful and to be in conversation and to get an understanding of really what is happening. Whenever I would go to those, and I would really accept as many invitations as I possibly could as a working person and as, a mom who also needed to be home sometimes. But I would go to as many as I could because I knew that I would make better decisions if I was more informed by the people who are doing the work and by the people that they are serving.
One of the things I think that's difficult about this is I do think is for as much as time I spend, complaining about obsession about culture war issues, it is valid for the public to be concerned about things like curriculum. Like it is valid for parents and for, even if you don't have kids in school, to be worried about or concerned with, I should say, maybe the better way to put it, what our schools are teaching. I mean, I think of something like the 1619 project, which was in vogue a few years ago and got very tied up in the critical race theory. I mean, it concerned me, the idea that we're going to teach a version of American history that says that our country was entirely organized around slavery. I don't think it's accurate. I think it's myopic. I think it's every bit as ideological and frankly stupid as the people who want to gloss over, the bad parts of our history. So I didn't want that taught in public schools, but I think the real struggle, and I think
that's also not where decisions are made, Rob. Like
right,
curriculum decisions are made at that local level.
Because I was going to get to that point. I think what concerns me is when people hear about that happening, they perhaps rightfully check and see, well, is it happening in our schools? Is it happening in Minot or Bismarck or Grand Forks or Fargo? And I think the problem is that coinciding with another problem we're struggling with right now, where we've lost faith in institutions, when educators, superintendents, school boards, teachers, what have you, say, well, we're not doing that, they're not believed. So I think it's a problem where even when we put the information out and we say, because to me, I'm satisfied. I look at what my kids are bringing home from school and I'm satisfied that, okay, well, that sort of myopia they're talking about nationally, it's not happening here. This is not something I have to worry about. I think there's some people that they just don't believe it. And I'm wondering how, I mean, is that on your radar? Because I mean, it's one thing to facilitate these conversations, but there's a trust gap, and I don't know how to address it.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend like somehow, forming this coalition is going to solve all of those challenges. It reminds me a little bit of the conversations that I've heard you and Chad and other guests have about how a lot of these big frustrations and challenges in the world right now continue to get put on the backs of public schools to somehow solve. It's not going to just happen. But it's certainly not going to happen if we don't try to build stronger, more trusted relationships. And it is I think the word trust is exactly where that lies. No matter who or where I would go as a legislator, you fall back to the people that you trust when you're making decisions and when you're taking advice and when you're accepting what information is true and what information is not true. If we don't try to build more of that trust, we certainly aren't going to make progress in any of it.
So I think the other thing that part of these conversations are, if you're advocating for public schools, there's an assumption that you think public schools are perfect. And that, I love public schools, so therefore I don't think they can get better. I mean, you're not suggesting that there's a perfect game being pitched out there by public schools. And do you see this as an opportunity for public schools to also learn more from parents and from kids and elected officials about sort of ways to get better?
For the short amount of time that this coalition sort of has existed, and certainly for the extent to which I have been involved, for as much as I'm going to be involved, I will make clear that I don't think public schools are perfect. Schools are run by humans, and humans are imperfect. So we're not going to pretend like everything is the best it can be. We should have the same mindset, and that is like a growth mindset and always trying to improve, that we would hope anybody else would have. That's certainly where I'm at with public education. But ultimately, I also recognize what the whole purpose of public education was and is, and the role of public schools. And I think if you love something, apply it to anything. I love our public schools and I love public education. And so I believe that when you love something, you invest in it. You try to make it the best it can be for whatever the purpose of it is. And I think public education should be the best it can be for as many of the kids and families that it serves, for the thousands of educators and staff that it employs, and for the communities that they are a part of.
How much, speaking on that, that the public schools aren't perfect. And I love our public schools. I'm a product of the Minot public school system. My children go to Minot public schools. I think our public schools in Minot are great. That being said, I think when it comes to some of the cultural issues, people being obsessed about, bathrooms or thinking that kids are requesting litter boxes in schools. A lot of that's absurd. Sometimes, though, I wonder if the schools have invited some of this by mission creep. And I think sometimes maybe it comes from the public school side as well. Well, we're going to use the schools as a mechanism to try to correct societal ills. And when we talk about putting things on the back of parents, right now we have a societal ill with cell phones. People, kids are spending too much time on screens. Well, we just passed a policy that put it on the back of the public schools to enforce screen time now during school hours. I worry about stuff like that. And I worry that when we invite those cultural things in, you're going to get the good with the bad. Maybe the screen time thing's not so bad. I'm a little skeptical that it's going to work all that well, but whatever, maybe it will. I don't think that's a bad thing to try. But I worry that when we invite school lunches, for instance, it's great that kids are getting school lunches during the school year, but now we're doing school lunches during the summer. Do you think mission creep in the public schools invites some of these problems, or maybe it would be better if they stayed in their lane?
I would suggest that the examples that you've provided and what you're saying of mission creep are not aligning. Like the schools didn't ask for the state to create a cell phone ban.
They didn't?
To the best of my knowledge. I don't know that.
I don't know of any group that asked for it.
Well, one of the defenses of the policy was the teachers wanted this. They wanted the state to step in.
None of the education.
What I heard the governor say multiple times is that teachers want parents want teachers to deal with it. Teachers want school, administrators to deal with it. Administrators want school boards to deal with it, and school board. I think heard that, but really, Rob, no.
I don't think it's a power grab from the schools. Maybe I formulated the wrong way. I think parents, outsource a lot of parenting to schools. I think that's true. I think yes. Politicians, like the civics education test, or kids aren't. So we're gonna impose the civics. I think politicians do it, and I think the schools do it to a degree. I think the problem is everywhere. I think because we're all trying to use the schools as this tool to fix what we perceive as being wrong in the world, we've really created a problem for ourselves. And I would like to see a refocus.
I agree with you. I just don't know that I agree with the premise that public schools are asking for that.
I think sometimes they are.
Okay.
Sometimes they are. I get the notes home from my kids, telling me how to parent all the time, how to hug my kids and what I should be feeding them and all sorts of stuff. And I got to tell you, just philosophically, it rubs me the wrong way. Now, maybe it doesn't maybe it's just a cultural difference, but it really bothers me when parents tell me how to parent my child. And it creates, now, not for me, because again, I love my public schools. I get along great with the teachers, but it rubs me the wrong way. And
I get what, I get what you're saying. I do. I just don't know if, I worry often about, I think about the way Chad and I parent at home and how everything we're doing in our home does or does not affect the day that our kid has at school. And do I wish that schools, for whatever reason, they're feeling the need to send a note home that says, send your kids to bed at a decent hour?
And by the way, they weren't singling me out. This was like a generic.
I know, Rob. I don't think they're just sending a note home in Rob Port's children's backpacks to.
Although we do struggle with bedtime, I will admit that.
I just think that there are so many things that impact a kid's ability to be successful inside a school building that schools don't have any control over. None. And so I don't know how you solve that. I don't know how you solve that.
I don't know what the right solution is, but I feel like if you try to do something for somebody, then it's like they stop doing it. And I think when schools try to parent kids, you're creating the side effect is that some parents might stop parenting or might start expecting, if you're going to be the parents, then I'm going to expect this, that, and the other thing. And we create these weird expectations for our schools that I think ultimately hurt the schools.
It's a hard job.
Yeah, they have a hard job. There's no doubt. One of the things that as we're starting school, I think Fargo starting today, Minot, Bismarck started last week. Rob and I talked about the emotionalness of raising children and when they stop needing you. The complaints and the thoughts that I'm hearing most about on social media are things that are really affecting people's individual lives right now, but maybe aren't like the thing that educates our kids, right? We're talking a lot about the cell phone ban and how that's being implemented. In Bismarck and Mandan, we're hearing a lot about the different start times that elementary kids are starting earlier, and transportation is changing and that kind of thing. So, and often I think our parents, rightfully so, this is dramatically affecting my life, right? The cell phone, all these different things that we can.
I wrote a column about it. Like we have different start times throughout the week. Like different days start at different times. My kids' two schools start at different times. It's a nightmare, and I will tell you, sometimes it feels like the schedule, whether it's the days off or the daily schedule, is written for the convenience of educators and not parents.
Right. And so I think that was one of the points I wanted to get to here is there's also that communication between parents and school districts. Rob, I think next week we're going to talk about the comment period at school board meetings and how that can be a little more useful. But I also think there's that engagement, right? What does that relationship between schools and parents look like? And what is the role of parents in that? I think, again, to Rob's point, I think schools want parents to function at a high level, and some parents don't have the skills they need, so they're trying to help them. But there has to be that communication. It's not just elected officials in schools, but it's also the students and the parents and the schools. And I mean, do you see a need for schools and teachers to do a better job of maybe figuring out how to engage in a different way beyond an email going out to parents?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this as a mom. Like, that's ultimately my role in North Dakotans for Public Schools. Like, all of the experiences I've had are great and helpful, but right now, like, I'm really doing this as a mom of a public school kid who I want to make sure every other parent and kid in the same positions we are, or in, harder positions or an easier position, whatever, can learn from districts or school buildings that are really doing a bang up job. I have thought about what it was like when I was a kid, and that's usually our only perspective in any of this is like, well, I know about schools because I've been a student, or I know about schools because I've been a parent. Well, I feel like, and part of this is the very different communities. I grew up in a town of 650 people, where it was the same school building, K through 12, one building. Same school building my parents went to when they were kids. Then me and my siblings went to when we were kids. And now all the kids growing up in and around Ray are also going to. That is a very different type of school system than Bismarck Public, with the highest student enrollment in the entire state. I want to be able to learn from and then share out really positive examples of authentic ways schools are partnering with families. And I do think that goes beyond sending an email, updating the Power School app, having a bingo night. There has to be some way of learning communities or schools that are doing just a really good job. And can that be replicated in ways that work in your community or in your school? Because I do feel a little bit less invited into our kids' school than I think probably my parents were when we were kids.
And that's primarily safety measures, right?
Right. So there is this there's this trade-off all the time of, now we need to keep it under lock and key because of safety protocols. And then, how do we ever, are we welcome to come in there as a parent?
One thing I will tell you as a parent, if I do have some feedback for my school, I almost feel hesitant to offer it because I don't want to be perceived as one of the parents who are showing up at school board meetings screaming at everybody. Like, I just want to be a parent. Like, it would work better for me if I didn't have to download and learn a new app to communicate with teachers every single year. And it
But
would
I also know,
when you want to send me a link to a website, if you could just email it to me instead of requiring me to download the Parent Square app, and then you email me a link to a Google Doc that then inside the Google Doc has the link to the website you want me to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it, like, I want to be able to offer that feedback, but I'm also not a crazy parent who just wants to scream at you. Like, I know you're a human being. There's probably a reason you're doing this. From the user end, it's not great. But I'm wondering if we're feeling like parents are being invited in. I'm wondering that's why, because our educators are also getting abused by
right. I mean, I think that, again, this is where we're at in the world right now, and I really hate it. Like, our inability to just have critical, constructive adult conversations that don't start from like an accusatory tone or manner. I try, I don't always succeed with help me understand. Like, this is what I heard, and given it was from an 8-year-old's perspective, so it might be not quite the full truth, or it might be just his own little perspective on it. Help me understand maybe the bigger picture. And then how do we work together on resolving it? And also recognizing that every situation is not for the schools to resolve. Last year, we had a really difficult little bullying situation where I reached out to the other parent. And I thought maybe we could try to have our children resolve this together without having to go to the school to solve all of our problems. Was it a little uncomfortable for me to send a message to that other mom and say, hey, this is what I heard happened at school. Can we talk about this? Can you figure out what you heard from your end? And I had no intention of even taking it to the school because I thought it was something that happened between two kids that wasn't the school's fault.
So, Erin, one of the goals of North Dakotans for Public Schools is to tell some success stories. And you had mentioned, from school district to school district. So as you're talking to people, I mean, are there any examples that pop in your head of teachers that are doing great there? I mean, there's so many, right? That's the other struggle that we have is these schools are like, yeah, this is what we do. And they don't talk about it because it's just what they do.
It is very much not our nature to brag about good things that are happening when that is what our job is. I think that is how educators feel. And sometimes they may not even realize it's something to brag about, but it's a really big deal to a kid and to their family when a light bulb goes off or when they start having a little bit of resilience, when they can respond to struggles a way where they take it on themselves. Like those are life-changing moments that teachers experience every day and don't ever talk about. To some extent, my perspective is still pretty limited to where I live and the way I engage. Last spring, I got invited in as a community member to be part of a panel of community members for senior projects up at Legacy High School. Like that's not where my kid go, but a history teacher who is unbelievably good at his job invites members of the community to come in, give feedback to these seniors from people who are not their teachers. And then I got to sit down on one of his classes and I left and literally asked him, like, is there a way I could just come in and sit in your class as a person who really wishes I had this kind of history teacher? And turn around and, August 1st or something, he was named North Dakota History Teacher of the Year. Like this stuff is happening all over. And as you guys know, just the negative catches on so much more than the positive. And we need to be people who spread good news, not just bad news.
I think and just to wrap up, I think one thing that's really really be useful too is a clearinghouse of information, because I know Minot Public Schools really well. I mean, I went there. I have a daughter who's been graduated for years now. I have a daughter who's graduating this year, and I have a son in the 4th grade. So I know this school system really well. But I don't always know. I don't know what's going on. Even somebody who does what I do for a living, I don't necessarily know what's going on in the Bismarck Public Schools or Williston or wherever. So I think a clearinghouse for that kind of information would be well, and hopefully to foster a two-way street, because I do think that the relationship between schools and parents has deteriorated, and probably there's enough blame to go around for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Defensiveness or aggressiveness or whatever. That we got to get over some of that and get back to working together a little bit more.
I think too often, I also hear like this public schools are one size fits all. There's nothing one size fits all from classroom to classroom, from school to school. I mean, we have, schools are so much different than they were 25, 40 years ago if you're Chad, 25 if you're me. We have expanded opportunities in career and tech ed and in course offerings. Kids are earning associate's degrees before they ever graduate from high school. Schools are partnering with local businesses and organizations where kids are earning credit for relevant learning and hands-on experiences outside of a traditional classroom. These are ways that I really think, and certainly it's not all, but I would challenge us then to figure out what is the barrier for our school to look like that? Is it at the local level? Is it at the state level? Is it at the, and like go where those decisions are made. Be an active partner instead of, again, they're not perfect, but then what are we doing to make them a little bit closer to perfect for the kids in our communities that they serve?
Erin, where can people find more information about North Dakota?
Oh, look at you just planting that right there.
Yeah,
Chad
look at
Oban.
me. Look at me. I've done this before.
So we have a website. It's ndforpublicschools.com. And we're also on Facebook. You can find us at ND for Public Schools. And right now we are also the ones behind the thousands of yard signs that are going up in lawns across North Dakota, just to spread a positive message. And it's actually doing what we were hoping it would do. We raised enough money, private money to purchase those, and they're doing exactly what we were hoping they would do. We're getting messages saying, oh man, I love driving by that every day and just feeling a little better about what I do, where I go, where I'm dropping my kids off. And we're excited to just contribute a little bit of positivity too.
Erin, thanks for your time.
Hey, thanks, guys. Nice to be with you.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up with Erin Oban, wife of my co-host and now an advocate for North Dakota for Public Schools, which I think is a worthy endeavor. Although I think its success will hinge on as long as it's not perceived or is not in reality, just sort of pushing a public school message onto the public. It really needs to be a conversation all the way around, because not every gripe, and you and Erin both, and I agree with it. Our public schools are not perfect. And depending on where you live, the problems might not maybe great. Maybe Devil's Lake is not great. I'm picking on Devil's Lake. That's not fair. I don't know.
So I will not let you take a shot at Devil's Lake, because Superintendent Ned Cluton will get mad at us. So we're not going to let that happen.
I'm not taking a shot. Devil's Lake's probably wonderful. But the point, and it doesn't even have to be big issues. Sometimes it's just small things about the way I bristle sometimes. I feel like when the teachers talk to me, it's like they're just talking to another student.
Right.
I think things like that could go a long way towards we just got to turn the temperature down on this.
And I like when Erin says, if you love something, you invest time to make it better. I think North Dakotans love their public schools. And I think we should be, as a community, investing in how we can make our public schools better, not attacking, I just feels like this is a place where this is something that it's a community, right? I mean, our public schools are a community. It doesn't feel like it should be something that is adversarial all the time. I agree with you. Like, we also have to, as a public school community, people get to have opinions. They get to be frustrated with you. They don't have to agree with everything you do, but I think school districts have to listen to folks. And so I just think that we need to calm down the temperature and the adults have to start acting like adults, frankly, if we want our kids to succeed in our schools. And part of that is celebrating successes, making sure people understand the successes, and then finding ways to get better.
There's tension between the educators and the parents. And I think the kids are stuck in the middle of that.
Right.
As you said, it's up to the grown-ups to ease some of that. And it's really hard because, again, I mean, not everybody comes to this argument in good faith. On both sides. I would say more now. I mean, it's hard. I mean, a lot of this gets informed by national things where we assume that public schools are this monolithic entity across the country.
Right.
So if some teachers union in some far off place is really doing something stupid, then we assume that all teachers unions are doing that, and that's not necessarily.
It's not the case. And I think the other
or even on if we see parents, getting rowdy at a school board meeting somewhere else, then we feel like that's how we have to behave in North Dakota. Or there's an assumption from educators that that's how parents will behave, and therefore we can't invite them in the room or something like that. It's all got to stop. It's like, as you said, I think that's great. The adults have to start behaving like adults.
The other thing, this has to be about, this isn't like an anti-private school thing, right? This is about our public schools. A yard sign in yard that says we love our public schools did not say, therefore we hate private schools, or therefore we hate people who homeschools. Though, the conversations around vouchers and they're different conversations. This conversation really needs to be about, Keith Kempenek, what you're saying is happening in our public schools as a reason for sending money is not true. You can have a reason why you believe that the state should help fund private school tuition, but the fact that public schools are indoctrinating our kids and have litter boxes in the bathrooms should not be one of those reasons, because it's not true.
Yeah, and some of this stuff gets hard. It gets really, when we're going to teach American history, it gets very subjective very quickly.
Especially with, the nationalization of so many of these things, and everything is a conflict. Right? You're either with me or against me on everything. And we don't have to be like that. And I would say just the vast majority of educators do welcome input from parents and that kind of thing. But I also understand what you're saying. You don't want to be that crazy dad who, people
I don't want the teacher to feel like I'm trying to micromanage her or him.
Right. Because you trust your kids' teachers unless they give you reason not to.
But from their perspective, I'm probably just another gripe that shows up in their email inbox. They don't know me that well among all the dozens or hundreds, depending, of other parents dealing with. They don't know me. So that's, I think it gets really hard. And then
it comes down to communications and relationships, right, Rob? It does come down to that.
And trust. We have lost faith in our institutions, and it's really too bad, because I think historically, you're right, North Dakotans value education. We have since statehood. Look at our outsized university system that I would say in some ways is probably too large.
Well, we're not going to go down that path.
Topic for a whole other debate. But we haven't. Suffice it to say, we invest heavily in higher education.
Right.
We invest heavily in K through 12 education. We do pretty well in North Dakota, given our tax base and some of the economic realities we have to live with. We do very well in North Dakota. But
we're doing less than we should be in K through 12. No, the reality is
another topic for another show.
Yeah, our per pupil payment has been going down nationally ranked. That's just the reality. But anyway,
what we're I think the issue, and your point about this not necessarily just being about public school. Even if we had passed the most lavish voucher bills that private school people could possibly imagine, most North Dakota students would still be going to a public school.
Absolutely.
It's just a reality. It is the reason why the state provides public schools is because it is a constitutional right. It's in the Constitution. It guarantees every North Dakota citizen in education.
And it's 91 to 93% of students right now go to a public school in North Dakota. So if you care about kids in North Dakota, if you care about their well-being, you should care about our public schools and making sure they're as good as we can have them.
Yeah. But there was something I wrote this week, and I kind of fell in love with the phrase when I came up with it, the tyranny of the small room, the tyranny of small rooms. And I think it applies in a lot of places. Sort of one of the places that it really got me thinking of is what's happening in the North Dakota Republican Party, where you have, party leaders get elected in small rooms where not a lot of people show up. There's not a lot of attention or scrutiny on them. A lot of shenanigans happen. And then when they get elected in these party positions, it's become very fashionable in recent years to assume that puts you on the same level of the people who win at the ballot box. And it does not.
Does not.
But because they're showing up at those meetings and they have success at those meetings, I think it works for town halls when you see members of Congress go out and they get shouted at or they get booed. And then there's a perception, right now we're seeing a lot of stories about a lot of members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, who are getting shouted at and stuff at town hall meetings.
We're both advocates of more
I'm advocates for town hall meetings. That being said, most of those people are probably going to win re-election because the shouts and the things that are happening at that town hall are not necessarily reflective of the larger public. As much as I think town halls are important, I think sometimes we elevate their importance. And not just town hall meetings or party reorganizations, I would say school board meetings or other sorts of, city council meetings or whatever. There is a tendency, and I think this is hard for the news media because, we're basing our stories on things that we can observe and things that we can measure, things that we can get data on. And a lot of times where the public's at can be very nebulous, particularly in a state like North Dakota where there's not a lot of public opinion polling. So we just don't get a lot of surveys to tell us where the public's at. And so really what we end up focusing on are, sort of palpable expressions of public opinion. And that becomes letters to the editor, maybe callers to a talk radio show, or the people who show up at public meetings. I wrote about one that happened in Harwood about an AI data center that Applied Digital wants to build there. And you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. We're going to be talking to Public Service Commissioner Sherry Hogan-Hofferth about, some of the claims that that's going to drive up utility rights. She's very pro AI in our state. What does that mean for energy consumption? Anyway, there's a lot going on with that debate. But that public meeting, which had a few hundred people, so it was a big meeting. The fact that some people got up and were angry or perturbed or made accusations created a perception of that situation that I don't know is reflective of reality. And so I think that's the problem is in a lot of ways, I think a lot of what's driving this, whether it's, what's happening in politics, what's happening in local government, what's happening in school boards in our schools, and even, what's happening in debates over something like AI, it's because the loudest voices are getting the most attention, even when they're not necessarily the majority. I think very sensitive to what gets posted on Facebook in a community. And we're allowing that to govern us. And there's got to be a way to get beyond that and to get at the truth of how people really feeling.
And those loud voices also physically keep out other people who don't want to go to a school board meeting and just listen to the same guy complain about the same things over and over and over, right? And so what you lead to is decision makers at a school board level or city commission level or whatever. The only public input they're getting is from this very loud, often negative, no matter, what the issue is. They're just if the city commission is considering it's a bad thing. And so I think about Bismarck and they're again, the start times, the transportation, whatever. Did the district get a really good bit of information from the public? Because often the public is checked out because at these school board meetings, it's the same people complaining about the same things over and over. And I will say there is no monopoly on the right or the left when it comes to people showing up at local political subs, open mic time. It's
being completely insufferable.
Right.
And often detached from reality and for all their pomp and circumstance, often have a very loose grasp on how any of this actually works because they're just there and they think their anger gives them a sort of righteousness. And that's also another problem with the venue is the people who are satisfied generally aren't showing up. Usually if people decide, well, I need to go to a school board meeting, it's because they're having a problem or see a problem, not because they want to show up and cheerlead. And I don't know what to do with that.
I don't know.
It's hard to ask busy people to show up at school board meetings and cheerlead for their teachers when you're satisfied with your schools. But that's just the reality of that venue is the people are the problem. But it's not just the people who disagree with the critics. It could be somebody who has a normal criticism or a reasonable criticism.
It's lost.
Like they want to stand up because I don't want to be lumped in with the guy who's screaming about Jews or something. And it's like, oh, I really don't want to get up in that context because I don't want to look like I'm with that guy.
And also, so many of these things are so complicated, right? And so if you just have people standing up as a local political sub is making a big decision, if it's an AI center, if it's a start time of schools, whatever, there's so much information that's coming at you. And generally the people at public, here I go down my line of don't trust the average voter. This is supposed to be Port's thing. But the reality is a lot of the folks who are showing up at these meetings don't know all that they should know. And often they're not directly affected by it, but they just like to show up and complain. If I'm in Harwood and I'm living next to this potential AI center, I think I have an opinion that should be taken into consideration. If I'm just somebody who's against every AI center or get whatever the city commission wants to do or hates the mayor because I think he's a sellout, I'm not sure your opinion should matter that much.
One of the things that jumped out at me in the forum article about the Harwood meeting is somebody shouted out criminals, called them. And the thing is that's really the attitude these days, right? I mean, it's absurd. There's nothing criminal about proposing. You may love the data center, you may hate the data center. There's nothing criminal about it. It's a proposal. Maybe you think it's the right one, maybe you don't. But that is the attitude too. Is it's not just that I think you're wrong about school lunches or curriculum or whatever, but you must have some nefarious, you're lining your pockets or you're a groomer or you're trying to do something to indoctrinate our children because you're an evil communist or bourgeois capitalist. I don't know, whatever, pick your flavor.
And so often, like on education, it's just people who want to educate your kids, right? I mean, that at the end of the day, that's what they want to do. They want to make our little people better. They don't have some long-term goals.
And that was my point when we were talking to Erin about kind of sticking to the basics, because I think sometimes school districts, and I think it comes from a place, I know it comes from a place of goodness and good intent, but sometimes we get a little grandiose in our aspirations of what we're going to do. And I think that starts inviting in, okay, well, if we're going to do all that stuff, then we're going to do all this other stuff, or I'm going to have really strong opinions about the stuff that you're trying. I really kind of feel like a back to basics thing.
So, but Rob, let's go through like
But I'm also struggling to articulate this a little bit.
No, but let's go to a real life scenario, right? And so you're in a school, you've got a kid who's having some mental health, behavioral health issues, whatever. The school district helps them set up an appointment to go and get the services they need, and then the parent fails to deliver them to that appointment. That really negatively affects not only the people working in that building, but the other students. At that point, the adults in that building have to get involved to help this kid because the parents are failing.
Yeah. No, I think
it's not the kid's fault, right? It's the parents' fault.
It's less extreme. That's a very extreme example.
But it's a normal example, frankly.
Normal example, but it's out on the spectrum. Yeah, I'm more talking about, I remember, and granted this was a different age, but I remember going in and my school curriculum was coal plants are evil. And that was, it's like, well, simultaneously living in a state that owns a not small amount of its prosperity to coal plants.
Well, sitting in a building that's paid for by coal plant taxes.
I remember watching Captain Planet, that propaganda in the classroom as educational material. I think stuff like that is a little too cute sometimes.
Sure.
We could reel it in. And granted, that was a long time ago. But there is sometimes, but also I think as a society, my kids have had teachers who have expressed opinions in the classroom and they've come home and told, and granted, this is my kids recounting it, so I'm getting it secondhand, but right. I know what happens where sometimes a teacher gets a little opinionated. Okay. And it doesn't bother me that much. I'm very opinionated, but also I like to think that I'm raising strong-minded kids, and I'm not afraid of them going out in the world and hearing things or seeing things that I disagree with. What I'm hoping is that I am teaching them in a way that allows them to arrive at their own decisions that are driven by, good factual understanding, good ethics, good morals, and that they'll arrive at those things on themselves. But I think sometimes the indoctrination charge, are you worried that the schools are indoctrinating your kids, or are you worried that the schools are undermining the indoctrination that you're trying to do? Because I don't think parents should be trying to indoctrinate their children either.
I think that's exactly right, Rob. I'm just sitting here
I don't know. This is me as a parent. I'm trying to raise free thinkers.
yeah. And I'm trying to raise a free thinker at my house too, other than his favorite baseball team. That is non-negotiable on what that's going to be. But I'm sitting here thinking about like in high school and like the teachers I had, and particularly government teachers. And if I knew their political affiliation or their ideology at the time, and to a person I can't remember any that I knew at the time, their ideology, since then, as being involved in politics and whatever, I now know, right, of some of them are very conservative or very liberal. But I don't think at the time, and maybe it's because I just didn't understand, maybe as a 15-year-old, I didn't know I was being indoctrinated.
I remember my American history, American government, that's what we called it, American government teacher, was a stone conservative man, like Goldwater conservative. I loved him. I thought he was fantastic, as you might imagine.
So because he was indoctrinating you in the right way, right?
He didn't I don't think he indoctrinated me. I already kind of came to the classroom with some of those, unformed as they were at 18. But I think he was very interesting. But for as conservative as he was, he did a pretty good job of explaining the entirety of the issues. Right. We got some of his editorializing along with it. I don't think we have so much to be afraid of with these things. I think it's another. I've been using the term moral panic a lot lately, but I think it's right. I think parents are always afraid that the succeeding generation is terrible and the millennials are terrible, Gen Z is terrible, and I think it's just old people who are just upset that things aren't being done the way it was done.
Right.
For a lot. And the thing is, expectation, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I would just encourage people listening, and we have a lot of elected officials who listen to this, reach out to your school administrators and your teachers and figure out what's really happening in your schools. And I also think voters need to pay attention. If there are legislators who every election, Rob, you and I know that they say every person running for office is going to say they support education. Ask them what that means.
Yeah. Just as one more example, I just thought of this, but I think Rupak Gandhi, the former superintendent, I think is maybe an example of, on the education side, somebody who did not foster a good relationship with elected leaders. I think his sort of very emotional decision, and I understand that was an emotional piece of legislation, the gender pronouns. I did not support that legislation. I understand why people were upset about it. But when you're in that position that he's in, and to just say, I'm just going to defy the legislature, was a terrible, terrible mistake.
And especially when he ultimately didn't defy it, right? I mean, like, the way he handled that was not defying the thing, but he said at a school board meeting he was going to defy it, right? I mean, and that has led to bill after bill after bill of the legislature trying to figure out how to punish school districts who don't follow the law, which is problematic because that hurts kids. It doesn't hurt the superintendent. But I agree that we've been dealing with at the legislature as public school advocates, decisions made at a local district, often Fargo, that then the state tries to change century code responding to that. And that's not a good way to make public policy.
Well, it's not. It's not. I mean, like it or not, I mean, and the problem is it's such a power struggle. And I think everybody, from legislators to school boards to educators and administrators to parents, nobody is going to ever be able to just impose their will on this. You are never going to reach a point where the curriculum is just exactly what you want it to be, and every teacher is teaching exactly the way you want them to teach. You live in the real world where it's diverse in every way it can be diverse, and you're just going to have to deal with it. That is the price of admission to a free society. And if you don't like it, go live in North Korea or something where everything can be directed by, one group of people and just match your sensibilities.
And finally on this, I mean, the vast majority of our public schools are doing incredible work in a hard environment, right? I mean, there are a lot of society's ills and a lot of society's opinions that are coming into the buildings, and the vast majority of our schools are doing a great job, and we should be celebrating them and rising them up and continuing to figure out how to get everybody to that level.
I agree. And it's just a balance of what are good faith criticisms that should be addressed and should have conversations about, and what is just malarkey. And it's hard because I'm certain maybe people listening to this don't agree with you and I about what the malarkey is.
Well, and that's just it. And if you're a school leader, do you chase every shining pile of malarkey that's out there and respond to it? Or do you say, listen, that is so dumb. There's not a litter box in the bathroom. We're not going to respond to that. But then it grows. And like, how do you determine what do you chase?
Its own, and you try to shut it down. That creates an information vacuum. And then we all know with information vacuums in the social media, they get filled with baloney.
It's tough. It's
a no-win situation. Anyway, I hope this effort can help. Once again, ndforpublicschools.com is the website. And as always, if you want to engage with us, you can leave a voicemail or send us a text message, 701-587-3141. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. Our handle is Plain Talk ND. As always, thank you for listening, and we'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
Yeah, look at me. I've done this before.